Today we're doing a day in the life review of the iPhone SE 3rd Gen in 2024, discussing and evaluating the device as I go through a typical day's worth of activities. We're going to go out and use some GPS, get some work done, go to the gym, take some photos and videos, and much more, all while using the iPhone SE 3rd Gen to get me through the day. And of course, we will be checking in on the battery life periodically throughout the day. So the iPhone SE 3rd Gen was released in mid-2022 and has been the cheapest iPhone in Apple's lineup since then, starting at $429. This phone features a 4.7-inch LCD display with a home button and Touch ID biometric authentication, not Face ID. And it features rounded aluminum sides with a glass back. The phone is powered by the Apple A15 chip, which is the very same processor that powers the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 13. It's Apple's third to latest generation iPhone processor, and it has plenty of power and longevity for anybody. It's a very powerful chipset, and it is nice to see such a powerful and future-proof processor in Apple's cheapest iPhone offering. The SE 3rd Gen here features a 2018 milliamp hour battery, which is very small by today's standards, and unfortunately it does show, as this device is known for having not great battery life. But of course, as always, battery performance entirely depends on how you use your device, so your results will vary, and again, we'll be checking in on the battery performance throughout the day. And I just want to take a moment and thank iPhone VPN for sponsoring this video. If you're not familiar with VPNs, they offer a secure connection route to the internet through an encrypted tunnel, protecting your private information and anonymity by way of masking your IP address. This is particularly important when using public, unsecured Wi-Fi networks, which is something I do frequently when working in coffee shops and when traveling. Another fantastic advantage VPNs offer is the ability to bypass geographical restrictions for content libraries on streaming services. With iPhone VPN, you can connect to different regions with just a tap and gain access to their local content regardless of where you happen to be located. iPhone VPN works on all your devices, including iOS and Android smartphones and tablets, macOS and Windows PCs, streaming devices, and consoles. And as a limited time offer, you can get 88% off the 5-year plan, making the cost just $1.17 per month. I'll leave a link to where you can check out iPhone VPN in the video description down below. Big thanks again to iPhone for sponsoring this video. So the iPhone SE 3rd Gen here shares the very same design as the much older iPhone 8, which was released all the way back in 2017. So this iPhone features a very arguably outdated design with very large bezels on the top and bottom of the front, a very small display size, and lesser premium display tech, it being an LCD display as opposed to an OLED display that every other iPhone Apple is selling has. However, again, it also features the Apple A15 processor, which is once again the same processor found in the recently released iPhone 14 and iPhone 13. So this phone is an interesting mixture of very old and pretty new tech because it features the same design and display tech as the iPhone 8, but it also features that fairly new A15 processor that shipped with the iPhone 14 just a little over a year ago. So even though you're getting a device with an old design and many old tech components, you're also getting a device that has a very powerful processor. So this phone will remain fast and responsive for years to come, and will get software update support for many years to come. This phone features a single 12 megapixel rear-facing camera on the back with an f1.8 aperture, which honestly takes pretty solid photos. And speaking of the camera, as usual, we're going to head out and take some more photos and videos on the iPhone SE 3rd Gen, in addition to some of the other iPhones Apple is currently selling, and compare them. So as I mentioned, unlike every other iPhone Apple currently sells, the iPhone SE 3rd Gen only has one main rear-facing camera, which means you don't get that additional ultra-wide capability. So here's a standard photo taken on the main lens of the iPhone SE 3rd Gen compared to photos taken with the main lenses of some other iPhones Apple is currently selling. And honestly, the SE 3rd Gen looks pretty good, even when compared to the latest iPhone 15. Now, when zooming into a photo after you've taken it, you do start to notice the advantage the more expensive iPhones have, especially the new iPhone 15 with its 48 megapixel main lens. But for the average casual phone user, the main camera on the SE3 is probably going to be perfectly fine. Now, this being said, even though the main lens looks quite good and can do basically everything that the average person would need, you're still missing out on that additional ultra-wide lens and some new features that Apple has added to the newer iPhones. But I feel like the average person who wants to buy this phone iPhone probably isn't going to need all the bells and whistles of having the latest and greatest camera tech. And here's a front-facing photo taken on all these iPhones as well. Now, the SE 3rd Gen here has a 7-megapixel front-facing camera with an f2.2 aperture, while all the other iPhones I'm showing here have 12-megapixel main front-facing camera lenses. And the difference is noticeable when you really look closely. The SE 3rd Gen's front-facing photos don't look quite as sharp as any of the other iPhones shown here. But this being said, it's enough for FaceTime calls and whatnot. It's not great quality, but it's passable because it's just the front-facing camera, not the rear-facing camera. And here's some video shot on all these iPhones, all taken at 4K 60 frames per second. And once again, the SE 3rd Gen holds up quite well in this regard too, in comparison to the higher-end iPhones. So pretty impressive there. And also, here's some video shot with the front-facing cameras as well. The SE 3rd Gen's max video recording quality for the front camera is 1080p at 30 frames per second, while all the other iPhones shown here could go up to 4K at 60 frames per second. And alright, next up we're going to head on over to the gym and do our typical 1 hour of music streaming to Bluetooth headphones while I work out here. And going into this, we're at 93%. So we'll keep an eye on how much battery consumption occurs during 1 hour of music streaming to Bluetooth headphones. And alright, checking in after an hour, we're sitting at 87%, so 6 percentage points lost during that time. Now, in terms of nighttime photography, the SE 3rd Gen unfortunately doesn't have night mode, meaning nighttime shots will look considerably better and brighter on all the other iPhones Apple is selling right now, as they do have that night mode feature. And it does make a pretty big difference, as you can see. So if you're a frequent nighttime photographer, the SE 3rd Gen isn't going to be the best option for you. But alright, after leaving the gym and heading back to my apartment and taking a quick shower, it's time to knock out some work. And I got around 4 hours of work to knock out. And throughout this time, I will be periodically using the phone to browse social media. Throughout this 4-hour period, I ended up using the phone for an accumulated 45 minutes to browse Instagram and Twitter. But of course, for the majority of this time, the phone was just asleep while I was working. But alright, checking in after this time period working with some time using the phone in between, we're currently sitting at 72%. So real quick, I want to talk about if this phone is going to be a good investment in 2024. And as much as this phone does have a handful of good things going for it, I honestly don't recommend it to most people in 2024. Once again, the iPhone SE 3rd Gen here is $429. Instead of buying this phone, I would highly recommend buying the iPhone 13 instead, which is going to cost an additional $170 than the iPhone SE 3rd Gen here, the iPhone 13 starting at $599. But that extra $170 for the iPhone 13 will get you a much better overall iPhone experience. On the iPhone 13, you get an OLED 6.1-inch display, while you have a much smaller 4.7-inch LCD display on the SE 3rd Gen, which is a less premium display technology. You get a much larger 3,227 milliamp hour battery on the iPhone 13 that'll easily get you through the day, while you have a much smaller 2018 milliamp hour battery on the SE 3rd Gen that doesn't deliver fantastic battery life. You get a better quality camera system with more features and an additional ultra-wide lens. You get a much more modern iPhone design overall and much more. The only people I'd recommend buy the iPhone SE 3rd Gen right now are people who really value having a small and more compact device, or people who don't use their phones that much throughout the day. And this is because of the small screen size by today's standards and the not great battery life. Again though, it's important to remember that the SE 3rd Gen here has the Apple A15 processor powering it, which is the very same processor that the iPhone 13 has. So it's going to be just as fast as the iPhone 13, and it'll most likely get the same amount of software update support as the iPhone 13 will get throughout the next several years. But the problem with the iPhone SE 3rd Gen is the overall design, and a lot of the tech inside is quite outdated and frankly has been for several years, other than, of course, that A15 processor. So in regards to anything but speed and performance and software update support long term, buying this phone right now just isn't a great investment, as it's only going to get further and further away from what modern smartphones are in terms of display technology, display size, battery size, camera technology, and more. Again, unless having a very small and compact device is more important to you than all of those attributes I just mentioned. Alright, so next up we're going to do a 20-minute FaceTime call test with the iPhone SE 3rd Gen. So we're just going to hop on a FaceTime call with another iPhone that I have here, and see how much battery consumption occurs after 20 minutes of FaceTime. And going into it, we're at 68%. And checking in after 20 minutes of this FaceTime call being active, we're currently sitting at 54%. So we dropped 14 percentage points in that 20-minute FaceTime call, which is quite a lot. But as I often say, FaceTiming is one of the most battery taxing tasks on iPhones, and with a device like this that doesn't have that large of a battery, it is to be expected. So if you spend a lot of time on FaceTime every day, that is going to take a pretty big hit on battery life. Now, of course, it depends on a variety of factors like your screen brightness, your internet connection, and a host of other things. So as I always say, your results will vary to some degree. But anyways, next I realized I had around 30 more minutes of work to knock out. And while doing that, I did stream Spotify to my Bluetooth headphones from the iPhone SE 3rd Gen here for around 30 minutes. But after wrapping up that work, I used the phone for around another 30 minutes to look at some emails and social media, and capped off the night with 40 minutes of YouTube video streaming to my Bluetooth headphones from the phone as well. So guys, in conclusion, I don't recommend buying the iPhone SE 3rd Gen in 2024. The display tech and display size, the battery, and the cameras just aren't quite enough to warrant this price in 2024, in my opinion. And once again, the iPhone SE 3rd Gen starts at $429. However, for an additional $170, you could get the iPhone 13 at $599, which will bring you a much better overall iPhone experience. I'd only recommend the iPhone SE 3rd Gen to people that really value having a compact and smaller form factor device, or people who just don't use their phone very frequently. This being said though, there is really something nice about having such a small, compact device, and also having a Touch ID. It just never misses, unlocks every single time. Face ID, sometimes if the angle isn't right, it's not going to unlock and you have to put in your passcode, but I have no issues with Touch ID. And again, just the overall compact form factor is nice, but I personally would not want to use a device with this small of a display in 2024. And one final battery check, we're currently sitting at 36%. You can see the top applications that consume the most battery performance, FaceTime being the first with that 20-minute FaceTime call, Instagram beneath that, Spotify, and Gmail. In terms of my usage patterns, today was a pretty moderate day, I'd say. I am definitely not a power user by any means. I do pretty light, simple things on my phone in my day-to-day life. So there would definitely be a handful of days with my average usage patterns where this phone would get me through a day. But there would definitely also be days where I would kill it in a day. Like if I had triple the amount of FaceTime calls and my social media usage was a lot more, I could have easily, killed this phone in a day. But it all just depends on your usage patterns. But generally, the iPhone SE, again, is not known for having a good battery life, as it just has a tiny battery. But all this stuff is very relative. And again, just keep in mind that I do pretty simple things for the most part on my phone. I'm not exporting 4K video on my phone or even shooting that much video to begin with, or gaming or anything of that sort. And guys, that just about wraps it up for this video. Let me know your thoughts on the iPhone SE 3rd Gen in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. And of course, as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.